Ethan Parker's world shattered the moment he saw the text message on his wife's phone. He had always trusted her, loved her with everything he had. They had built a life together, a life he thought was strong enough to withstand anything. But in that single moment, all of it came crashing down. Ethan wasn't the jealous type. He had always been secure in his relationship with Jessica, even when things had started to feel distant. She had become more withdrawn over the past few months, but he had chalked it up to stress from work, from life. They had a 3-year-old daughter, Lily, to care for. Life had a way of getting in the way of intimacy sometimes, but the message on her phone left no room for doubt. "I miss you," it read. "Can't wait to see you again. Love you." The words were simple, but the impact was devastating. Ethan's heart dropped into his stomach as he stared at the screen, trying to process what he was seeing. It wasn't from a colleague. It wasn't some innocent conversation. It was from someone else, a man. A wave of nausea hit him as he realized the truth. His wife, the woman he had trusted more than anyone, had been cheating on him. In the silence of their bedroom, Ethan's mind spun out of control. His body went cold as his thoughts raced. How had he not seen it? The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the emotional distance. Had all of it been lies? His hands shook as he set the phone down. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in on him. He wanted to scream, to confront her, but he knew he couldn't just yet. Not when he was this fragile. Not when the pain was still so fresh. Instead, he grabbed his jacket, left the house without a word, and drove aimlessly, trying to outrun the ache in his chest. He didn't know where he was going, or even why. He just needed to escape, to clear his head. But it didn't help. The thought of what he had just discovered kept swirling around in his mind. The text message replayed over and over. "I love you." The words echoed in his head, cutting deeper with each repetition. After hours of driving, Ethan found himself back at home, standing in the doorway of their house. He could hear Lily laughing in the other room, the sound of her tiny voice reminding him of what he had lost, what he was about to lose. His marriage, his family had just crumbled in front of him, and all he could do was stand there, paralyzed by the weight of it all. The following days felt like a blur of shattered thoughts and painful realization. Ethan couldn't escape the overwhelming sense of betrayal that clouded his every move. He found himself staring at the empty space next to him in bed, a constant reminder of everything he had lost. Jessica had packed her things and left within hours of their confrontation. Her silence the loudest thing in the room. She hadn't apologized. She hadn't even said goodbye. She had just walked out, leaving Ethan alone with their 3-year-old daughter, Lily, who was blissfully unaware of the chaos her father was drowning in. Ethan tried to keep it together for Lily. She needed him, and he couldn't afford to fall apart completely. But the truth was, he didn't know who he was anymore. The man who had been so sure of his life, so confident in his love for Jessica, was now a stranger to himself. He spent his days going through the motions, work, meals, picking up Lily from daycare, but his mind was always elsewhere, lost in the suffocating weight of his grief. Lily's laughter, once the sweetest sound in the world, now felt like a reminder of his own failure. How could he protect her from the mess of his life when he couldn't even protect himself? He caught himself staring at her sometimes, watching her play, wondering how long it would take before she noticed that her father wasn't the same anymore. She deserved more than this, more than the broken man who was now raising her. Every night, after putting Lily to bed, Ethan would retreat into the silence of the house. The walls felt like they were closing in on him. He sat in the dark, replaying the images of Jessica and the affair, wondering how it all went wrong. What had he missed? Had he been so wrapped up in his own life that he couldn't see the cracks forming in theirs? His thoughts turned darker with each passing day. The loneliness consumed him, gnawing at the edges of his mind. He was exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally. And as the days went by, the pain in his chest grew unbearable. One evening, after a particularly difficult conversation with his lawyer, Ethan found himself alone in the kitchen, staring at a bottle of pills. His hands were shaking as he picked it up, his thoughts clouded by the overwhelming weight of everything he had lost. He thought of Lily, of the future he'd hoped for, and the life he'd dreamed of giving her. But tonight, all of that felt too far out of reach. The pain was too much, and the emptiness he felt was suffocating. He stood at the counter, the bottle still in his hand, and for a moment, everything felt still. The sound of the world outside seemed so distant, so irrelevant. The only thing that mattered in that moment was the quiet voice in his mind telling him it could all be over, that the pain could stop. Then, out of nowhere, a small voice broke through the fog of his thoughts. "Daddy?" Ethan froze. He turned, startled to see Lily standing in the doorway, her big eyes wide and innocent, staring up at him. She looked so small, so vulnerable, and in that moment, something inside him snapped. The weight of his grief, of his self-doubt, of his thoughts of giving up, all of it came crashing down in a wave of emotion. He dropped the bottle and collapsed onto his knees, pulling Lily into his arms. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with tears. "I'm so sorry." Lily hugged him tightly, her tiny arms around his neck, as if she could somehow fix the broken man in front of her. She didn't understand what was happening, but in that moment, Ethan realized she didn't have to. She just needed her father to be there. As he held her close, Ethan made a silent vow. He would find a way to survive this. For her, he couldn't give up. Not now. Before we continue the story, drop a comment telling me how you liked it, where you're watching from, and give this story a rating out of 10. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the best stories. The days that followed were filled with small victories. Ethan fought to keep the darkness at bay for Lily's sake. Every morning he forced himself to rise, to take care of her, to do the best he could. But it wasn't easy. The heaviness lingered, threatening to pull him under at any moment. And then, one fateful morning, it all came crashing down again. Ethan had been feeling unusually dizzy for a few days, but he chalked it up to stress and sleepless nights. That morning, however, the dizziness intensified and he staggered to the bathroom, feeling like the ground beneath him was moving. His vision blurred, and before he knew it, he was on the floor, disoriented and weak. He didn't know how long he had been lying there before he heard Lily's worried voice calling for him from the hallway, but he knew something was wrong. He couldn't even sit up without feeling like he might pass out. In a moment of panic, he dialed 911. An ambulance arrived minutes later, and Ethan was rushed to the hospital, his thoughts swimming in a haze of confusion. They told him it was stress-induced exhaustion, brought on by a combination of emotional turmoil and neglecting his health. The doctors assured him that he would be fine with some rest, but the diagnosis felt like another reminder of how far he had fallen. As he lay in the sterile hospital bed, staring at the white ceiling, a sense of hopelessness overwhelmed him. It wasn't just his physical health that was deteriorating, it was everything. His marriage was gone, his sense of self had been shattered, and now his body was rebelling against him. He barely noticed when the door to his room opened. "Mr. Parker?" A calm, professional voice said. Ethan turned his head slowly, his gaze meeting the woman standing in the doorway. His heart skipped a beat as his eyes locked onto her face. Dr. Sarah Williams. The name hit him like a bolt of lightning. She looked the same as she had when they were kids, her brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her warm brown eyes filled with the same kindness he remembered. But now she was a surgeon. Now she was the one standing in front of him, wearing the white coat, holding his future in her hands. For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. It had been years since he'd seen Sarah. They had lost touch after she had moved away when they were children. He had never forgotten her, though. She had been his first crush, the girl he had secretly admired from afar. Back then, she had given him a small bracelet, her favorite, she had said, and he had kept it for years, a token of the love he had never expressed. "Sarah," he whispered, almost incredulously. Her eyes softened, and she stepped closer to the bed. "Ethan," she said, her voice filled with recognition and surprise. "I had no idea it was you. How have you been?" Ethan swallowed, unsure of how to answer. "Not great," he admitted quietly, his voice low. I've been going through a lot." Sarah nodded, her gaze gentle. "I'm sorry to hear that. You're in good hands here. We'll make sure you get the care you need." But Ethan wasn't sure he could trust anyone anymore. He had trusted Jessica. He had trusted the life they had built. and it had all been ripped away. But something about Sarah's presence made him feel like he wasn't entirely alone. She had always been the one person who had truly understood him. "What happened?" she asked softly, her eyes searching his face. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't ready to open up about his marriage, his failed relationship, the depths of his pain, but Sarah's kind eyes made him feel safe. Safe enough to finally let the words slip out. "My wife cheated on me," he confessed, his voice cracking. "She left me, and now I don't know who I am anymore." The silence that followed was thick with understanding. Sarah didn't say anything at first. Instead, she simply sat beside him, her hand gently resting on his arm, offering comfort without speaking. She had always known how to make him feel seen, even when they were kids. After a long pause, Sarah finally spoke again. "You don't have to go through this alone, Ethan," she said quietly. "You're not the first person to go through something like this, and you won't be the last. But you do have to take care of yourself, for you and for Lily." Her words, soft and steady, felt like a lifeline. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like there was someone who understood. He wasn't sure how much he could heal, but in that moment he realized that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to face it alone. The days in the hospital passed slowly, each one blending into the next. Ethan's body began to heal, but it was his mind, his heart, that needed the most care. And Sarah, once his childhood friend, had become the person who was helping him put the pieces of his broken life back together. Sarah made sure to check on him regularly, often just sitting with him in silence, allowing him to talk when he was ready. She didn't push him to open up about the past or his failed marriage, but when he did, her responses were always compassionate, filled with understanding. She had told him that healing wasn't linear, that some days would be harder than others. She was right, of course, but having her there made the days easier to bear. It wasn't just the medical care that was helping Ethan. It was Sarah's presence, her kindness, the way she made him feel seen again. One afternoon, after one of their conversations, Sarah pulled something from her pocket. Ethan had been staring out the window, the sunlight streaming in wet. She quietly placed a small silver bracelet on his bedside table. He turned, his heart suddenly racing. It was the same bracelet, the one she had given him all those years ago when they were just kids. The same bracelet he had kept in a drawer, hidden away for all these years. The same bracelet that had been a symbol of his first love, his first unspoken crush. "Do you remember this?" Sarah asked, her voice soft, almost tentative. Ethan could only stare at it for a moment. The memory of that summer they spent together flooding back. The long walks, the stolen glances, the way she had given him that bracelet as a token of her affection. He had never forgotten her. He never could. How did you?" Ethan's words trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah smiled faintly. "I kept it too," she said quietly. "I never really let go of it. And after all these years, I thought maybe you might want it back." Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for the bracelet. He had never imagined that one day he would be holding it again, not like this. The connection between them felt almost surreal, but deep down it made perfect sense. "Why didn't we ever?" Ethan began, but he couldn't finish the question. Too much time had passed, and too much had happened. Sarah met his gaze, her expression soft and understanding. "We were kids. We didn't know what we were feeling back then, but I never forgot you, Ethan." For a moment, the weight of everything they had lost seemed to fade. It wasn't about the past or the pain. It was about the possibility of healing, of rediscovering something that had once felt so real. Ethan looked at Sarah, his heart pounding. "I never stopped thinking about you," he whispered, his voice raw. "All these years, I never stopped thinking about you." Sarah's eyes filled with emotion, and she took his hand, her touch gentle and reassuring. "I don't want to be your past, Ethan. I want to be part of your future. If you'll let me." In that moment, everything shifted. The pieces of his life, his shattered marriage, his loneliness, the pain of betrayal, suddenly didn't matter as much. What mattered now was the chance for something new, something real. A chance to heal together. Ethan squeezed her hand, his heart finally starting to believe that he might be able to move forward. Maybe it wasn't too late for him. Maybe he could find love again, true love this time. "I want that too," he said quietly, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I'm scared, Sarah. I don't know if I can trust again." Sarah nodded. "Trust takes time, but I'm here for you. For both of you. Her words, her commitment, felt like a balm to his bruised soul. They were starting over not just as friends, but as something more, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like he was ready to take that step. He had so much healing left to do emotionally, mentally, and physically, but with Sarah by his side, maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have to face it alone. In the weeks that followed, Ethan's life began to shift in subtle, yet powerful ways. With Sarah's guidance and her quiet, unwavering presence, he started to peel away the layers of pain that had buried him for so long. It wasn't a quick process, nor was it easy, but every day he made small strides toward the man he wanted to become again, not just for Lily but for himself. Sarah continued to support him, not just as his childhood friend, but as someone who was slowly becoming something much more. They spent time together outside the hospital, away from the sterile walls and clinical conversations. They went for walks, sat in parks, and on one particularly clear evening shared dinner at a small cafe, just the two of them. In those moments, Ethan allowed himself to relax, to laugh without the weight of his past constantly hanging over him. The distance between them, the years spent apart, seemed to shrink with each passing day. But their bond, the one that had always been there, had only grown stronger. One evening, as they sat on a bench by a lake, the soft murmur of the water lapping against the shore, Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out the same silver bracelet that Ethan had held onto for all these years. "I never thought I'd get this back," he said softly, looking at the delicate silver chain. "I thought I'd lost it forever." "You didn't lose it," she replied with a smile. "You just kept it safe, waiting for the right time." Ethan turned to her, his gaze lingering on her face, as if he were seeing her for the first time, in a way that was completely different from how he had seen her as a child. His feelings had shifted, grown into something deeper, something he wanted, prepared for, but had also secretly hoped for all these years. "I never thought this would happen," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "That you'd come back into my life like this." Sarah smiled gently, her eyes filled with understanding. "Neither did I. But sometimes, life has a funny way of bringing us what we need when we least expect it." Ethan's heart clenched. He had been broken for so long, wrapped in grief and doubt, unsure if he could ever heal. But Sarah had helped him begin to see that healing didn't come all at once. It wasn't about fixing everything at once. It was about taking small, steady steps with people who cared by your side. "I'm scared, Sarah," he confessed, looking down at the bracelet in his hands. "I'm scared of trusting again. I don't want to get hurt, not again." She placed a hand over his, her touch warm and reassuring. "It's okay to be scared. I'm scared too, but I believe in us. And sometimes, you have to take that leap of faith, even if it's one small step at a time." They sat in silence for a few moments, the world around them fading into the background. For the first time in months, Ethan felt like the weight of the world wasn't crushing him. There was a possibility now, a chance at something real, something honest. A future he could begin to imagine. As the sun set behind them, casting a golden glow over the water, Ethan finally let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing. It was a future he was ready to embrace, with Sarah by his side, and maybe, just maybe, he could find the love and peace he had been searching for all along. Ethan's journey toward healing was no longer a solitary one. With Sarah by his side, he began to understand that his wounds weren't just something to endure, they were part of his story, and they didn't have to define him. The more time he spent with her, the more he realized how much he had missed in those years apart. Their shared history had created a connection that felt as if no time had passed at all. Every conversation with Sarah was filled with meaning. They would sit for hours, talking about everything and nothing at all. The unspoken bond between them had only grown stronger, and with it, so did the feelings Ethan had tried to bury deep inside himself. But now, with her presence in his life once more, he no longer felt like he was carrying the weight of the world alone. Sarah didn't pressure him. She let him go at his own pace, and that's what he needed. Her patience, her understanding was like a balm to his wounds, slowly mending the broken parts of him. As they spent more time together, Ethan found himself falling for her all over again. The way she laughed, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her work, the way she simply listened, when he needed to talk. But it wasn't just Sarah's presence that was healing him. It was also his time with Lily. As he spent more one-on-one time with his daughter, taking her to the park or reading her bedtime stories, he rediscovered the joy that had once filled his heart. Lily had become his anchor, the one who kept him grounded when everything around him seemed to be in chaos. One Saturday morning, as Ethan and Lily played in the backyard, the doorbell rang. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead and walked inside, wondering who it could be. To his surprise, when he opened the door, it was Jessica. She stood there, hesitantly, with a look of guilt and shame on her face. It had been weeks since he had last seen her, and the thought of facing her made Ethan's stomach tighten. But he took a deep breath, reminding himself that he had come a long way. He had survived the worst, and now he was stronger. "I need to talk to you," Jessica said quietly, her eyes avoiding his. Ethan stepped aside to let her in, but his mind was already racing. He had no idea what to expect from this conversation. The last time they had spoken, it had been filled with anger and hurt. Now all he wanted was peace for himself and for Lily. They sat down in the living room, a strange silence hanging in the air between them. "I know I've hurt you," Jessica began, her voice cracking, "and I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake, and I've lost everything because of it." Ethan stared at her, emotion swirling in his chest. He had always loved her, but that love had been shattered, and while he couldn't erase the past, he knew he had moved past the bitterness. He had learned that forgiveness wasn't about excusing someone's action. It was about freeing himself from the pain they had caused. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with an underlying sadness, "but I'll try. For Lily." Jessica nodded, her face filled with remorse. "I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and I'll be here for Lily whenever she's ready." Ethan's heart ached as he looked at her. He wasn't sure what the future held for him and Jessica, but he knew that the path forward had to be one of healing for both of them. Weeks passed, and the fragile peace between Ethan and Jessica remained. It wasn't easy, but they found a new rhythm, one that involved co-parenting with a level of respect that hadn't existed during the final months of their marriage. For the sake of Lily, they kept their interactions civil, working together to make sure she felt safe and loved. Ethan's life was slowly coming together. He had found a sense of balance in his daily routine, something that had seemed impossible just a few months ago. His relationship with Sarah had evolved from the cautious reconnection of old friends to something deeper, something that felt both familiar and new. They had spent more time together, their connection growing stronger with each passing day. Ethan was no longer the man who had been broken by betrayal. He was becoming someone new, someone who understood the importance of healing and taking life one step at a time. One afternoon, as Ethan sat in the living room, reading a book while Lily played in the background, Sarah knocked on the door. She smiled as she stepped inside, a warm glow in her eyes. "Hi there," she greeted, her voice soft and full of warmth. "Hey, I wasn't expecting you today," Ethan replied, standing up to give her a hug. He had become accustomed to her visits, her presence in his life, providing a sense of stability he hadn't realized he needed. "I thought I'd stop by. Bring some lunch," she said with a playful grin. "And maybe some company for you and Lily." As they sat down to eat, Ethan found himself looking at Sarah in a way he hadn't before. The years apart had created distance, but now that they had reconnected, it felt like they were picking up exactly where they had left off. Except this time, they were both different, wiser, stronger, and ready for something real. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, her eyes meeting Ethan's. "Maybe it's time for us to take the next step. We've both been through so much, but I think we deserve a chance to make something beautiful out of all this mess." Ethan looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. "I don't want to rush things," he said quietly, "but I think we've both waited long enough. I want to try, Sarah. I want to see where this goes." Sarah's smile grew, and in that moment, Ethan realized that this was the chance he'd been waiting for. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. Ethan's life was no longer defined by pain and loss. The slow, steady journey toward healing had led him to a place he never thought he would be. His bond with Lily had grown stronger, and his relationship with Sarah had become the anchor he never knew he needed. She had shown him the power of second chances, not just in love but in life itself. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan and Sarah spent more time together, weaving their past and present into something new. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when old wounds resurfaced, but their connection, built on a foundation of shared history, trust, and understanding, allowed them to face those challenges with a strength neither of them had thought possible. Ethan often found himself thinking about the future, about what he wanted to create. For the first time in a long time, he was filled with hope, not just for himself, but for Lily, and for the life he was beginning to build with Sarah. They talked about their plans, their dreams, and what kind of life they wanted to give Lily. The thought of a new beginning with someone who truly understood him, someone who had always been there in the background of his life, was a future he was eager to embrace. One Saturday afternoon, as Ethan and Sarah sat together in the living room, Lily playing with her toys nearby, Ethan turned to Sarah, his heart full. "I never thought I'd be here," he said quietly. "After everything that's happened, I didn't think I'd ever be able to feel this way again, happy, whole." Sarah reached out, her hand finding his. "You are, Ethan. You're whole. We both are. It's not about forgetting the past. It's about building something better from it." Ethan smiled, the weight of her words settling in his chest. He knew she was right. The past had shaped him, yes, but it didn't have to control his future. In the weeks that followed, they began planning their future together, slowly, cautiously, but with a sense of excitement and possibility. They knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but they were ready to walk it together hand in hand, as a family. And as he looked at Lily, her innocent smile lighting up the room, Ethan realized that, in the end, the most important thing was the love they had for each other. No matter what the future held, they had survived the storm, and they had come out stronger on the other side. Moral of the story: this story shows us that even in the face of betrayal and heartbreak, there is always a chance for healing and new beginnings. Love, trust, and patience can mend the most broken parts of us. Sometimes life's greatest gifts come after our hardest struggles, and it's never too late to find happiness and peace.